Welcome to Tea and Strumpets, a Regency romance review. I'm Zoe.
And I'm Kelsey.
And I think we said this last week that this is our first episode back from my maternity leave.
But we lied.
We did lie. We totally lied because, well, we didn't totally lie. We just had time to record another one before.
Yes, we weren't sure we were going to get to this one, but then Zoe, we had this lovely break because we were so on our recording schedule that Zoe was like, well, if I get through the book, I'll let you know. And I was like, okay, well, I've read it. I'm ready to go. If you get through it, I'll get the notes done, and then we can record real fast. That way, we've got extra time on the bookend of this.
Yeah, who knows when babies actually come. So if this one comes as late as my first one, then I wouldn't have quite as many episodes in the bank.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. So the more we can put out, the better.
Yes. And it's fun to record with you, Kelsey.
I know. I like seeing you too.
So I'm excited to talk about this book. And the book we are talking about today is Maiden Lane number 5, Lord of Darkness by Elizabeth Hoyt.
Yes, we are talking about it. We're back in Maiden Lane, and we get to learn about another ghost of St. Giles.
Another ghost, you say?
Ghost of St. Giles. You know what? It was funny. I was writing my handwritten short notes on this as I was going to it. And then in my shorthand, I literally said a G St. G. And I was like, can we just refer to them as the G St. G from now on? That way I don't have to continually say it throughout the entire synopsis.
Yeah, listeners, I'm not sure you know how often Kelsey says St. Giles because I think I've edited all of them out.
I just, for some reason, it's I know it's Giles. I understand that. But for some reason, I can't say it when I'm reading it. I just can't.
We all have our things, and hopefully, listeners, you forgive us and laugh along with us. So we do have a couple little author facts this week. You know, Elizabeth Hoyt's Maiden Lane series is very long, so obviously there's a lot to learn about a person, but today I wanted to share that on her website, there are a whole bunch of extra tidbits about Maiden Lane. There's a section for each of her series where you can find some extra materials, and they include for Maiden Lane a couple of extra epilogues,
Ooh.
Which is pretty cool because, as we've kind of mentioned, usually the epilogue features the next book. It's more of an intro to what's happening next than the extra happily ever after. And so she has one for Scandalous Desires and one for Dearest Rogue, which I don't think we've read Dearest Rogue yet.
No, we have not.
So regardless, I did go ahead and read the one for Scandalous Desires.
Oh.
So that is Silence and Charming Mickey's book. And it was cute. And it's about them having their first child together.
Okay.
And if it's going to be a boy or a girl and how it gets its name. And it's very cute. So especially as someone who is pregnant and doesn't know the gender of my child, it was super quick little fun read. So I highly recommend listeners, you go check those out. That is at elizabethhoyt.com in the extras section of her website. And there's also 2 Christmas extras, which she has Once Upon a Maiden Lane. No, it's not Once Upon a Maiden Lane. What? Oh my God, we covered it on the show. We have it. We have it as an episode. The Maiden Lane novella that's goodness gracious. One of us should look it up, but we're not going to. It exists in our feed, I promise, listeners. And there already is a Maiden Lane Christmas novella, but these are just separate little Christmas stories, and they both feature the couple from the next book in the series. So yeah, so kind of fun, and maybe, you never know, maybe Kelsey and I will cover those this winter as a bonus.
Who knows? Maybe. We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Yeah, so that's really great. So if you want to check those out, it's at elizabethhoyt.com, and Hoyt is spelled Hoyt. But today, we are not talking about all that. That was fun little tidbits, but today we're talking about Lord of Darkness, and our main tropes today are marriage of convenience and age gap. It doesn't come up a lot, but it is there.
Yep. 12 years definitely qualifies as an age gap.
Yes, it does.
And our main characters are Godric St. John and Lady Margaret Megs St. John. And she is Hero's sister-in-law and Griffin's sister from, I believe, our last book? Or two books ago? Couple books ago.
No. Second book. Theirs is the second book, and we're on number 5.
The second book, yeah. Well, anyhow.
Anyway, there's that story. If you want to go back to our episode number on the second Maiden Lane book and get a refresher.
Today we do have a trigger warning as well, and that trigger warning is miscarriage. So if that is a topic that you don't want to explore, I will just mention that we will be past that pretty quickly in our synopsis.
Yes.
So speaking of our synopsis, Kelsey, shall we get into it?
We shall. Margaret Megs St. John has returned to London after 2 years to finally consummate her marriage of haste to Godric St. John. For his part, Godric has barely spoken to his wife in 2 years. They've exchanged letters, but they have not seen each other in almost the entirety of their marriage. Godric, having suffered the loss of his first wife and love of his life after a long, painful illness, never planned to marry again. Their marriage was arranged by Meg's brother Griffin, who, upon learning that Megs was pregnant and the father had been killed, blackmailed Godric into the match. Megs miscarried almost immediately after the wedding and has spent the last 2 years at Godric's country estate.
Both were happy with a separate union, but now Megs has returned to London because she is no longer willing to be content in life. She wishes to reach for happiness and believes that having a child is the way to achieve that.
Now, Godric also happens to be the ghost of St. Giles. Giles. God damn it! We just talked about this.
All right, I'm leaving that one in.
Godric also happens to be the ghost of St. Giles.
No, Giles.
Giles.
Did you not? You had it right the first time.
Oh my God, I just can't. Am I saying Giles or Giles?
Giles.
Giles.
With a soft G.
Okay.
You got this.
No, Godric also happens to be the ghost of St. Giles, who is rumored to have killed Meg's former lover, Roger, in cold blood. Megs is hoping to avenge Roger's death by killing the ghost while she's in London. Also, the Lassie Snatchers are back. Woo! You don't know who they are? Refer back to our last Maiden Lane episode.
Yeah, and as we know, it's been 2 years since they were around. So there's actually been like a 2-year time gap between the last book and this book, just to kind of like make that clear here. So when Meg arrives in London, she proceeds to turn Godric's life upside down. We also get to meet Mrs. Crumb, her housekeeper, who will be a main character in her own book much later on. Megs is quickly upfront with Godric about her desire for a child, but he turns her down flat. He tells her it was not part of the agreement he made with her brother. Megs, who had been grieving, really didn't know the details of the arrangement that her brother made and is taken back at this revelation.
That evening, Megs and Godric attend a ball where she knew she would find the Viscount d'Arc, who you will remember from our last book was great friends with Roger and spent most of the last book hunting for the ghost. Megs is hoping to gain information from him, and in the process, Godric gets jealous seeing his wife try to get the attention of a known rake. Quote, "The truth was that he'd not been unmoved by her embrace. Her kiss had been so essentially her, unplanned, reckless, without studied skill, and all the more erotic because of it. She made something deep inside of him wake and stir, as if he still lived and had hope for this life."
After the ball, Meg goes to confront her brother and learns that Griffin had blackmailed Godric to get him to marry Megs. But Griffin will not divulge the secret he used in this endeavor. After leaving her brother, Meg goes into St. Giles to the place where Roger was killed. Godric is there to confront her as the ghost. However, she pulls a pistol, but it fails to unload. Godric, whose libido was reignited earlier, kisses her when he divests her of the gun.
Megs, enraged and slightly turned on, takes a small dagger from her person and manages to stab the ghost in the back, which is how she finds out the ghost is in fact her husband.
I know, pretty surprising we get this out of the way so early, but we do. Megs is instantly in help mode and rushes Godric to the carriage. Godric hears the hoofbeats of the coming dragoons who have been hunting the ghost mercilessly and arranges to have it look like they're having a tete-a-tete in the carriage to get them off the trail of the ghost. So they do arrive home safely and Godric is tended to.
The following day, Godric tells Meg about his life and how he became the ghost. He lost his mother at the age of 10, and then his father remarried 3 years later. Godric, being a boy of that preteen angsty age, was mad at his father and felt he was replacing his mother. So instead of going home on school holidays, he went and hung out at a family friend's house, Sir Stanley Gilpin. There, Sir Stanley taught him the trade of the ghost, and this is where Megs finds out Godric is not the only ghost.
He actually only took up the mantle of the ghost once his first wife, Clara, had become bedridden, and feeling frustrated with his inability to help her in any way, he used the ghost as an outlet for his frustration.
Godric also takes the time to tell Megs he did not kill Roger. In fact, he was at the ball that night and is the one who caught Megs when she fainted at the news of his death. Godric does agree to help her look for more information about Roger's death, though.
Megs understands all of this, but what she doesn't understand is why Godric is still the ghost if Clara has been dead for 3 years. Godric doesn't have an answer to this.
He is in fact contemplating this when he is next in St. Giles. Thanks. God, this series is going to be so long if I can't figure out this word. He is looking for information on the Lassie Snatchers, but while doing that, he also learns that rumor has it Roger was killed by a fellow aristocrat.
The following day, Godric finds Megs in the garden. He tells her he is willing to consummate the marriage, but only if she agrees to leave London and her hunt for Roger's murderer once she finds out that she is successfully pregnant. He does not agree to stop any ghostly activities. Megs, desperately wanting a child, agrees to this.
Since we are now planning to consummate the marriage, we get a couple encounters. Both are very businesslike, and Godric leaves the second encounter angry, and with the words, quote, "Who are you making love to, my lady? For I know it's not me."
In between encounters, Godric's stepmother and remaining sisters, as the eldest Sarah had accompanied Megs into town, joined them at St. House. Mrs. St. John tells Megs that she's had enough of giving Godric time to come to them, and she's going on the offensive.
After encounter number 2, Godric goes out again as the ghost, and we meet Elf, who is able to provide valuable information on the Lassie Snatchers. Elf has starring roles in a few books.
Godric, after thinking over their last encounter, comes back and tells Megs that they need new rules for their time with each other. Full participation is needed. Quote, "I made a promise to you," he said, "and I will keep it, but not as we did before." She suddenly knew he was talking of their lovemaking the previous night. I'm sorry," she stuttered. "I didn't mean to give you the impression that I was pretending you were Roger. I wasn't. It's just that what we did seemed like a betrayal of him. I didn't want to lose him anymore." Her lips parted, but nothing more emerged because it had finally dawned on her whom she'd actually been betraying. "Don't you think I might have felt the same way about Clara?" he asked low. "Don't you think I had to sacrifice something to give you what you wanted?"
Oh, the beautiful honesty in their conversations.
Yes. It took a little while to get there, but once they have this conversation, truly everything starts to click into place.
Mm-hmm. After this, things move on, and we are once again in St. Giles. We are once again in St. Giles. Godric and Alf execute a liberation of 2 of the Lassie Snatchers' workshops. However, Godric does not get away unscathed, and Megs is summoned for help in getting him home. Mrs. St. John, upon hearing Godric is injured, accompanies her, which is good because it does lead to some good moments between stepmother and son. After all, he may not be of her blood, but Mrs. St. John only ever considered him hers.
Getting back home is not so uneventful because it turns out that Captain Trevelyan of the Dragoons has put together that Godric is the ghost and will be waiting for him to slip up.
2 weeks later, Godric has been recuperating from his injuries, but when Winter Makepeace comes by to tell him Alf has found the remaining Lassie Snatcher workshop, Godric springs into action. They free the girls, and Godric finally knows who's behind the Lassie Snatchers. The Earl of Kershaw, who you may not remember, was part of the foursome of Diarc, Roger, and Seymour. Seymour being our villain from our last book and was killed by Winter Makepeace.
When Godric returns from this mission, he returns to a furious wife, who then expresses her fury in a very steamy encounter.
While Godric is sleeping after their vigorous activity and also his injuries from his ghostly exploits, Megs learns that Viscount Diarc has come to call. He speaks about Roger, and with information from Megs, learns that Roger may have been propositioned about a business venture from his friend, the Earl of Kershaw. The same business venture Diarc turned down. But if Roger wanted to marry Megs, he may not have turned it down without prior knowledge of it.
After Diarc leaves and Godric awakens, Megs and Godric compare notes, and it all comes back to the Earl of Kershaw. But how do they prove it? And how can they ever hold an Earl accountable?
In the meantime, they have a real talk about embracing their growing feelings towards one another and having it not be a betrayal to their lost loved ones.
A short time later, Megs realizes she's pregnant. She is initially thrilled and excited, but then is worried if she tells Godric that he'll send her away right now, which was their deal. However, as much as she wants to confront Roger's killer, she also realizes she doesn't want to leave Godric.
Later at the Spring Gardens, Godric and Mrs. St. John have a heart-to-heart and reconciliation, and there is also a confrontation with the Earl of Kershaw. Megs tells him she knows he killed Roger, and he, instead of dismissing her accusations, throws down the gauntlet and tells her to prove it.
Furious with the man, Megs is venting and lets it slip that she is pregnant, but asks Godric not to send her away yet. Godric agrees she cannot leave London yet, and we have another encounter.
That evening, Godric goes to confront the Earl of Kershaw and follows him to St. Giles. Giles. Oh, yay, I'm doing it right. Now I'm just so worried I'm saying it wrong that I'm pausing.
Yeah.
And follows him to St. Giles. Damn it. St. Giles. Mm-hmm. There he sees that Kershaw has Alf. So Godric jumps into action. He is about to run Kershaw through with his sword when they are surrounded by Trevelyan and the Dragoons. Kershaw makes a move for Alf when she tells them Kershaw has been kidnapping girls, and Godric kills him before he can harm Alf.
Trevelyan tells the Dragoons to arrest Kershaw's people and leave him, the ghost, personally. Once they are away from the group, Trevelyan tells Godric to run, so he does. Luckily, Megs awoke after their encounter and, finding him gone, set out with a set of street clothes and the carriage. She picks him up and finally tells him how much she loves him. He tells her that Kershaw is dead and he not only loves her, but is ready to give up the ghost. Quote, I love you, Godric St. John, and now I am breaking my word. I will not leave you. You may either come with me to Laurelwood, or I'll stay here with you in your musty old house in London and drive you mad with all my talking and relatives and exotic sexual positions until you break down and love me back, for I'm warning you that I'm not giving up until you love me and we're a happy family with dozens of children. Much as I'd like you to convince me to fall in love with you by the use of exotic sexual positions, you don't need to. I have loved you, Meggie mine, since you sent that second letter.
4 weeks later, they are in the garden, excited about their new addition and also admiring the tree everyone said was dead, but thanks to Meg's patience and care, is now full of life. You know, because it's just a little foreshadowing metaphor from our author throughout the entire book.
Yes, it is.
And of course, our epilogue we will not get into, but I will titillate you with the fact that it is about our mysterious third ghost.
Ooh. Yes, very exciting. It was really hard for me to not just start reading that one right away after this one. This is where the series has
you
so
start
much
to
momentum.
steamroll through these books.
Yeah.
You're just like boom, 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 because now you're like invested. This is where I started to steamroll through them all.
Yes, of course, I want to know much more about the heroine of the next book, too. Oh my gosh. Anyhow, lots to discuss, but first, shall we adjourn to the parlor?
We shall.
Today, we would like to thank our newest patron as of this recording. So that's as of July.
Yay!
Hopefully, when we start recording new episodes again in October, in the fall, we will have more patrons to announce, and you can be one of them. But our newest patron is Marissa Atkinson. So Marissa, thank you so much for joining us on Patreon. And if you'd like to join Marissa and our other patrons, you can check out all our available tiers on patreon.com/T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, Strumpets.
Our Patreon tiers range from $3 to $10 a month, and each tier comes with bonus content, swag, and opportunities to be more involved with the podcast. So we hope you'll take a look. With your support, we're hoping that in the future we can hire an editor. This will free up time for us to hopefully record more too. Yay! Fun and exciting things.
Yeah, that's like, we haven't even set a goal for that yet, but that's definitely something we've been bouncing around. Like, gosh, if we could have somebody edit the podcast, we could probably do more episodes and just free up some time. And that would allow us to focus on the parts that are like even more rewarding, the reading and the talking. I love editing, but it's time consuming. And now I have 2 kids. And so, I think that would be a really great use of our patrons' support.
I think so as well. And as always, this podcast is and always will be free. But if you're in a position to show your support in a monetary fashion, we would be so, so grateful. So we do hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. And once again, the link to check that out is patreon.com/T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, Strumpets. And as always, there is a handy link in the show notes for you.
And if you're not in the place to support us monetarily, there are tons of other ways to support us. Of course, subscribing and listening to the show is the number one way to show your support. So thank you for listening. And if you'd like to do more, we always appreciate reviews on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, or wherever else you can review us. And it's been a while since we've had some new reviews. So we're kind of putting out the call. We'd love to hear from you guys on Apple Podcasts or Facebook. Let us know what you think of the show. Hit that 5-star, leave us a few sentences so you can let other listeners know what you really love about listening to Tea and Strumpets.
And finally, if you just want to support us on social media, you can. We're on Instagram and Twitter at T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, Strumpets, Facebook /TN Strumpets, and YouTube by searching our name.
All right, so this book, as we were saying before we started recording, was a little shorter and a little bit more straightforward than some of our Maiden Lane books.
Yes, but God, I loved how the honesty just kept making the plot just roll along at a nice, easy clip.
Yeah, no, I feel like this book is really successful because of that. Like, I think that, Winter's book is like kind of intense and like the plot is really big. I think we talked about it. It's been a little while. I think we said like we still liked all of that, but there was just like I wouldn't have edited any of it down necessarily. Mm-hmm. But this one just felt like really like smart as far as the plot and the character development.
Yeah, and I think this book, the plot for this book was really helped be set up by the last book. Like I would really say these books really go hand in hand because, our villains are essentially of the same group, from the 4th to the 5th book. We have a lot of the same characters. And also too, Megs' story starts in the last book. All those little parts that I left out were Megs' perspective, her falling in love, her finding out he's died, her finding out she's pregnant, and the epilogue is Griffin approaching Godric. So, those books really go hand in hand. But I love this storyline in essence too, only because even though there's the age difference, and this is where that age gap really wasn't a huge trope. However, it was in some ways because they both lost, tragically, someone they loved. For Godric, it was through a long, lingering illness of his first wife. He basically only had a year with her as his wife before her illness became too painful and she became too weak and was essentially bedridden for like the next, what was it, like 7 or
decade?
Like, yeah, almost 9 years. Yeah, it was 9 years, almost a decade. So, you know, he was dealing with that, and being the ghost helped him get through that. And Megs, for her part, even though she's so young, she did suffer the loss of someone tragically and suddenly. And, you know, she really did feel like, you know, she was happy at first having this marriage of convenience where no one saw each other. You know, she reached out to him via letters, you know, and they'd had a good correspondence. And
I don't know if they had a good correspondence.
Well, it wasn't a good correspondence. She sent him a lot of letters. He really liked her letters. And then he sent her terse replies. But
yes.
So, you know, but they really do open up and are honest. Like, you know, one of the things that I think this book could have fallen, one of the traps it could have fallen into would be like misunderstandings, secrets being withheld, and that making it frustrating for us as the reader, because it's like, just tell her already. But here it's like almost immediately she finds out he's the ghost.
It's so good when she stabs him and realizes it's him. It's
like an instant change. She doesn't want to kill him anymore. She's like, oh my God, Godric, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I mean, like, then he feels the need to even remind her, it wasn't me who killed Roger. I was there with you. Like, obvious, like I have the strongest alibi, but also like
none of the others did either.
He wants her to know, like, I don't want you to think even for a second it was me. I wouldn't have done that. And I mean, he does kill plenty of other people. Yeah. He does not have the same, you know, issues with killing that Winter did. But, yeah, no, I agree. I think that Megs and Godric, like, I think it's a really interesting story. They're both brokenhearted in their own way. They're both grieving loss in their own way. And, you know, Meg is younger. Her loss was faster. You know, it wasn't that lingering loss that Godric had to endure, which slowly took away parts of him over time. Megs was able to grieve and, you know, I don't know, maybe, you know, she didn't have the weight of that loss hanging over her for so many years that she had to shed, right? It takes Godric longer to kind of come around and to see these things and to be ready to make changes in his life, which makes total sense. You know, and Megs also lost a baby. Like, she lost doubly, right? Yes. So she lost the love of her life at the time. And then she lost the baby, which was her only connection to that love. And that was, I think, even harder for her. That's what made like everything just, because I think she was planning on, okay, well, at least I have this baby to go on for. Yeah. And then she doesn't. However, I don't want to linger too much on that. Yeah, I think it was great. And I think you mentioned something else with the plot too, how like we learned a lot about Megs in the previous book, in all of the pieces of the plot. I think this book also was a little bit more succinct, because the person who we're learning about in the side plot in this book is a little more mysterious. So we don't get to learn quite as much about her, but we get to know just enough that it's so like tantalizing. Like, I just want to know more about what's going on with Artemis, and the epilogue is like so good. And then I remembered, because I remember her book. I remember what the thing that she's trying to pawn. I remember whose it is. And I'm just very excited to read the next book. So, yeah, I thought this book was interesting. My complaint with this book is that the first 2 sex scenes are extremely uncomfortable. Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I think that we could have had that be one explanation scene and one
kind of fade to black scene, or like, you know, he stops it short and is like, I can't do this, you know.
Yeah.
It was really hard because, like, I mean, they were detailed encounters.
They were very detailed.
And the whole
very
encounter is like, you know, and it's not that Megs is against his attention. She's just like, she basically is like, I want to feel no pleasure from this.
Yeah, she feels it's a betrayal to Roger's memory, and the only way that she can have sex and have a baby is to not enjoy it. But she is a young, healthy, natural creature who is actually sort of attracted to her husband. So like, who's trying, and her husband is trying to make it a good time for her.
Yeah.
So like, it was just very awkward. And I wasn't like, I didn't remember that from this book. And so like, I was like, am I going to like this book? Like, I felt like I wasn't going to like this book after those two encounters. And oh boy.
Well, that's the thing is, I will say the 3 encounters after that,
right?
much steamier and hotter. Full participation. We get some fun in there. We get some like Megs being daring and taking charge.
Well, and they had a conversation about it. That was the thing. It's like Godric, you have much of the quote in here where he starts to say, and he's basically set up the room to like be romantic. And he's like, we are not going to like, it's going to be you and me, and we're going to both participate, or this can't continue, because that's just like it. He's so right. Like, that's not a way to have a relationship or to have sex with anybody. And she lets go, and like, they're open and honest, and it's great from there on. I cannot believe the turnaround as a reader for me that I went from, because I still remember how awkward those 2 first scenes made me feel.
Yeah.
But then I still came away from this book. Like, by the time I get to the end of this book, I'm in love with Godric and Megs and their relationship. But then when I reminisce back on the book, I still remember those awkward times, and they were pretty rough. But I think, you know, I mean, I guess that's good writing, right? Like, she really made it stick. She really made it impactful that like.
Well, and I think that, you know, if we'd made those, I think having those encounters be less awkward would make it feel like, you know, having that conversation might have been redundant or unnecessary, or like, or, you know, it might have been like, it's just so easy to write it where they're like, now we're just so, I think what I really liked this was she made sure that they both had those tough conversations with each other, instead of just being like, and now everything is fine. Or like, Megs decides mid-encounter that screw it, I'm going to enjoy this, you know, and that changes the dynamic. I think it's more powerful to see their relationship blossom and form after they basically are like, we need to stop here. We need to acknowledge our combined losses and how this is tough for both of us. But this is the situation we're in, and it's also not fair to us as living creatures to, you know, hold ourselves back from what could be.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree. I think that ultimately the arc is what was needed. And sometimes it's okay to feel uncomfortable about things that you read.
Yeah. But let's talk about our hero and heroine, though. I mean, our Megs and Godric. How do we feel about them as main characters?
I think they're both solid. Like, I feel kind of actually like even keeled about both of them. Like, they both are the same rating to me. I don't know if you feel a little differently, but I really like Godric. I like him dark and broody, but obviously like he's a romantic underneath it. And you know, because he loved his first wife, and like he's still like avenging her death or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not actually avenging her death, but he's just like, you know, acting like a vigilante to, you know, express his feelings about her death. So, and, you know, the way that he kind of comes around to Megs is beautiful and wonderful. And I like that. And then there's Megs, and she's just like, she's kind of effervescent. Like she is such a happy, sweet, caring person, right? Who just like really, you know, she kind of takes anybody and everybody under her wing. When she arrives, it's with like her aunt who has made the rounds to her entire family and no one wants her, so she won't give up her aunt, and her aunt's, irritating dog, and the boot black and the gardener and the boot black, because the boot black is the gardener's nephew and they couldn't leave him behind, so it's just like, all of these things. The gardener, no one else wanted to hire. Like, she's just kind of a wonderful person, and I feel really good about her. That being said, as great as I felt like they were, I did not particularly identify with them like more than anything else. So both of them to me are a 7.5.
Okay. Fair enough. I would say, based on how I do this, I'm going to rate them both an 8, only because, like we talked about, like, I think their characters so perfectly fit the storyline of this book. I think that they so perfectly worked together. I think that they both complemented each other. She had this effervescence about her, and it kind of made his life kind of spark back. Even just in the reading of his letters, like at the beginning, she comes back and he's like reading her letters that she wrote to him because he's kept them all, because like there's just something lively and silly about them, because she just like offhand say things and be like, oh, do you like, the roof is leaking, I feel bad, but can we get some money over here? And he's like, yeah, sure, go right ahead, but he's like, I think again, like he was already softening towards her before she actually came into the house. And then once being in her presence and talking things out with her, I think that it really, kept along with it. But again, I just felt their characters really felt true to their personalities. And I felt that there was no hampering of the plot because of their characters, which is why I'll give them an 8, because I also just liked them in general. Like, I just think they're good people.
Yes. Totally fair. I mean, I think you associated with them a little bit more strongly than me, and that's why your rating gets to be a little higher than mine. Yeah. I mean, that's
but these
great.
are arbitrary ratings. It's great.
So great. Well, do you have a favorite quote from this book?
Let me see.
I have one that is just like a little piece of writing that I enjoyed, which is actually from our side character story. There's a lot of great quotes in this one, but I'm just going to share this lighthearted one, which this is Artemis, who is the companion to Lady Penelope, who, as we know from the last book, is kind of an airhead. She's a member of the Lady Syndicate, but she has a lot of money, and she tried to replace Winter, make peace, but did not succeed. Anyhow, Artemis sighed, albeit fondly. If she'd thought Penelope was feather-headed before, it was nothing to what her cousin was like when she was determined to marry a duke. There were angled invitations, plotted chance meetings, and the near constant jealousy over Miss Royal, who, Artemis suspected, didn't even know she was engaged in a fierce rivalry with Penelope. I just appreciated that. It made me giggle when I was reading it.
It's so great, yeah, because Penelope's always in a fierce rivalry with anyone.
Yeah, and I believe Miss Royal has a novella somewhere in the series, and yeah, she definitely has no designs on this Duke, nor does she have any idea that she's in a rivalry with Penelope.
Okay, so here's one. There were a lot of just really funny moments in this book that I thought were just like fun and clever things that I just didn't highlight because they're just funny quips of writing, but I did highlight this one. And this is like on his way out to confront the Earl. So this is Godric. He huffed out a breath, nearly but not quite a laugh. Godric St. John, Lord of Darkness. He looked down at her as he eased from the bed. Why such a creature of light and love and life should have come to him, he could not fathom. But he was grateful.
Yes. I have another sweet one that maybe we can close on as well, because yours inspired me to remember this one. Mm-hmm. This is the love declaration.
Oh, yes.
And Megs is saying this at this point. She says, I love that you made love to me when I asked you, purely for politeness' sake, and I love that you got mad at me later and made me make love to you. I love that you've spent years selflessly saving people in St. Giles, although I want you to stop right now. I love that you killed a man for me, even if I'm still mad at you about it. Anyhow, it keeps going, and there's other things that she admits her love for, but I just really loved that. Even though I want you to stop right now.
Yeah, no, I love it because
I get you.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this too, like, again, I can't harp on it enough. It's just like, God, the honesty. But you know me, like any plot line where they're just honest with each other up front, as I'm like, yes, see, we can have a successful romance novel without misunderstanding tropes, because guess what? Not all of us enjoy those. We don't like being frustrated as we're reading a book.
No, thank you. All right, so steaminess rating. This is an interesting one for me because of the up and down. I feel like the beginning of the book is like frigid. Like it's it's off-putting, right?
Yeah.
It's like really bitter cold tea that you just like have there because you need the caffeine.
Yeah. But then you get that dollop of milk and you stick it in the microwave and bam, it's delicious again.
Yes. The last 3 are real hot and there are 5 encounters.
Yeah. So if you take out the other 2, it's still a fairly heavy encounter book.
Yes. So our feminist recap, I think this one's a supporter. I think that Megs is, just generally a person that likes to lift others up, etc. I think actually that the 2 encounters that they have, and then they go on to talk about it and everything we've already said about all that. Like, I think that actually like speaks to sex positivity and feminism a little bit too. Just because they made me uncomfortable doesn't mean it wasn't good for me to read about it.
Yeah. I think too, it's a supporter in a sense too, because Godric never belittles her or tells her not to do something. Like he starts to, he's like, well, you can't do that because you're a woman. He's like, well, I can do that because I'm a man. And she's like, yeah, and I'm a woman. So we're still going to make that happen. Like there's a cute line about that one.
There's a line I did want to share that made me think of, feminism when I read it. And this is after he sees her with Diarc the first time at the ball. And she, I never meant, he began. You convict me without trial, she hissed over him, and on pathetically thin evidence. You were flirting, madam. And if I was, she asked, her eyes widening dramatically, if every woman who flirted in a ballroom were deemed a slut, then all but nuns and babes would be thus branded. Do you truly think I meant to start an affair with the Viscount? Like, yeah, go Megs.
Yes. I love it because it's like, but again, like, and then, even when she, tells him that she needs to see like Roger's murder, like either avenged or solved, it was avenged and then she finds out he's the ghost. But so then it's really who killed Roger. Like now she just needs to know who killed him, and it's just something that she needs to know. And, again, he understands that because like while his loss was tragic and terrible, like he was aware of it. Like it was, the sort of Damocles over his head, but he was aware that it was there versus she had no awareness. Her lover's life was just snuffed out one evening, and changed the course of her life. So he understands that need for closure in that sense. And he doesn't try to dismiss her need for closure. And then even at the end, instead of having a huge argument about her needing to leave because she's pregnant and him being worried about her, he's like, he immediately is like, of course you have to stay.
Yes.
Of course you don't. Of course you can't leave right now.
I was so thankful. I was like, oh, thank God. Well, we're at our final book rating. I feel the same about this book as I feel about the characters. I feel this book is somewhere between good and great. I love this book. I love that this book is like really succinct in its plot and its characters. I think like it's a good book. I really enjoyed reading it. It really hit the spot. So I'm going to give it a 7.5.
Perfect. I'm going to give it a little bit higher. I'm going to give it an 8. And I was even leaning towards an 8.5, only because this book not only is good of itself, but it also, I think, changes the course of the series for a reader. I think, one of the struggles I had, especially at the beginning of the series, was like, the first 3 books were a slog. And like Winter's book was much better. But then once I rolled into this one, I was like, where are the rest of them? Let me at them. Yep. And honestly, the pace never changed after that. Like,
I agree.
So like for me, that's why it rates highly, not just because of its own value, but because of what I think it brings to the series as a whole.
And the main character is named Godric.
I know. It's such a
how
great...
often do you get that?
I know, right?
Yeah, I knew a horse named Godric. Did you know Godric? I can't remember if you were there when Godric was there.
No, Godric.
Okay, well, I knew a horse named Godric, and his nickname was Godge, which is weird, but like so charming. And and of course, I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so Godric Gryffindor, and you have her brother-in-law Griffin. Anyhow, the point is, or her brother, not brother-in-law. The point is, what are we reading next time?
Next time, we're going to be joined by Laura from What to Read Next, and we're going to be talking all about Halloween books. And so we're going to give you not only some great Regency historical Halloween books, but she's also going to give you some of her favorite recommendations. And she has a podcast all about book recommendations, so they're going to be good.
Very fun. And when you say we,
I mean me and Laura, because Zoe wasn't there, because Zoe was having a baby, and I told her she could just not worry about it.
Yes. So this is going to be really fun, listeners. Kelsey and Laura are going to be taking over and talking to you all about Halloween-themed reads next week. And I really hope you all enjoy it as much as I did. Well, thank you all so much for listening, and join us next week for our Halloween list.
And may all your ever afters end happily.